Okay, we're going to take a little bit of a left turn here and talk about uh, historic uh, mysteries, which is part of the genre of mystery per se, but these are nonfiction stories, events that actually did happen, and they are, as of yet, unsolved. So, our first story talks about a museum in Boston. It's called the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. And it was a private museum owned by Isabella Stewart Gardner. And she was born in the mid 1800s. And her father was a very wealthy linen manufacturer. And she had all the privilege of money from that time, well educated, educated here in the United States, but also traveled throughout Europe as part of her further education. Now, as she traveled throughout Europe, she became fascinated by the great master works of art. And she had the money and the means, and she started to collect them. Well, after a time, she collected so much that she had a museum built right in Boston to display and house all of her famous art exhibits. So this is from an article called A Mystery for the Ages, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum Heist by MILTON ESTEROW. And it's from the artnewspaper.com. And this was written a couple of years ago. But the theft itself took place in the 1990. So here we go. An empty frame remains where the storm on the Sea of Galilee was once displayed in the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, courtesy of the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The walls of the office of Anthony Amore, the chief of security of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston since 2005, are covered with reproductions of all 13 works stolen in one of the biggest unsolved art thefts in history, when two men posing as police officers made off with the treasures painted by Rembrandt, Vermeer, Degas, and Manet on the 19th of March in 1990. At Vermeer's home, drawings by his daughter of Rembrandt's The Storm on the Sea of Galilee, one of the works that was taken, hang on the door of his refrigerator. Quote, "I'm still wildly obsessed more than ever," he says. "I constantly think about those paintings." Jeffrey Kelly, the FBI's lead investigator on the theft since 2002, who works closely with Amore, considers himself equally obsessed. On the wall in his finished basement at home is a reproduction of The Storm of the Sea of Galilee that his wife gave him 3 years ago. Quote, "She frayed the edges of the painting had been sliced out of the frame," Kelly said. Despite more than 30,000 leads, hunches, forensic tests, psychic visions, jailhouse confessions, and hundreds of interviews with drug dealers, mobsters, retired police officers, journalists, museum directors, museum guards, and art dealers in the United States, Europe, Asia, and South America, authorities are still no closer to knowing the whereabouts of the works. Although the art has been estimated for some time to be worth $500 million, the skyrocketing art market has led some experts to raise the figure significantly. It's at least $1 billion, says Otto Newman, a senior vice president of Sotheby's and a dealer in old masters for more than 30 years. The Vermeer alone, called The Concert, is worth nearly $500 million. Johannes Vermeer, the Concert, painted 1663 to 66, was Isabella Stewart Gardner's first major art purchase. Experts estimate the missing masterpiece is worth nearly $500 million today. The theft was explored last year in a 10-part podcast called Last Seen, a joint project of radio station WBUR, a national public radio affiliate, and the Boston Globe, a local Boston newspaper, which tracked down one lead to Florida to no avail. There have never been any demands for ransom, but tips still come in almost every week. Quote, some callers have been pestering us in the FBI for years, one of them since 2013. Some are very strange, Amor says. Anthony, one man, recently insisted that JFK Jr. and his wife were the thieves and faked their deaths to commit the crime. There are two kinds of tips, Kelly says. There are people who have a theory on who is involved in the theft. We check it out. Sometimes it isn't easy because the suspect might be dead, or we will interview a suspect and he denies it, Kelly says. Investigators can only apply so much pressure to get information because the statute of limitations to prosecute the theft as a crime expired in March 1995. So suspects are told about the potential for immunity from other legal prosecution and the $10 million reward offered by the museum. Then there are the people who are convinced. They are very specific that they know where the art is. Among those investigated by Kelly and Amor is Robert Gentile, 82 years old, a former gangster mobster suspected of concealing secrets about the theft, who was released from prison last March after serving 4 years for 3 gun and drug cases. He insists that he knows nothing about the theft and that he was framed by the widow of a mob associate who said her husband gave Gentile 2 of the stolen works around the year 2000. Subsequently, the FBI searched Gentile's house in Manchester, Connecticut, 3 times in the last 3 decades, with dozens of agents, ground-penetrating radar, canine dog units. They found guns, drugs, gun silencers, $20,000 stuffed in a clock, police hats, badges, and a list of the stolen Gardner Museum work with possible black market prices. If Gentile told us everything he knows, we'd be further along in our recovery efforts, FBI Agent Kelly says. I believe that some of the paintings have changed hands several times over the years. It is also quite possible that some people have those paintings and don't know what they have, Kelly says. We are confident we know who committed the crime. We believe they don't still have the art. We don't know if the art is all together or was split up. Top investigators who have weighed in on the theft disagree about where the works are now held. William Whitman, the former head of the FBI's art crime team, says some of the paintings could have ended up in Corsica. In 2006, when Whitman was still with the FBI, he posed as an unscrupulous art dealer who had clients interested in buying the Gardner paintings. He met two thugs from Corsica who indicated that the Vermeer and one of the Rembrandts were held by a gang there. The operation turned up nothing in the end, Whitman says, because of bureaucratic difficulties and turf fighting. But an officer of the French National Police agreed with his theory. Why would the thieves steal a Napoleonic statue instead of another painting, Whitman said, referring to the gilded bronze eagle statue decoration that was stolen along with the master paintings. Why? Quote, because Napoleon was from Corsica. Charlie Hill, formerly of Scotland Yard Art and Antique Squad, disagrees. Although Napoleon was from Corsica, the paintings are in Ireland, behind a wall in West Dublin, rather than in the United States, behind a wall in South Philadelphia. He declined to elaborate, however. Kelly and Amor said they have no evidence that the paintings are in Corsica or Ireland. The FBI believes that in the years after the heist, some of the art was taken to Philadelphia, where it was offered for sale by those responsible for the theft. Amor has created an extensive database on his computer that lists every person that the investigators have contacted over the years. I enter every piece of information about every person of interest we've heard about, he says. I stopped counting, but there are at least 30,000 different pieces of information. Address, phone numbers, vehicle information, biographical data, places of employment. It helps us when I get a new phone call and saves a lot of time. Many visitors to the Gardner Museum spend time looking at the empty frames that held the stolen paintings and still hang on the walls empty. But not everyone is interested in seeing them. I've talked to people who used to come here as students. Amor says, but they haven't come back because to them the sad is so theft. The theft is so sad. Okay, so let's take a look at a video news story on this Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum theft. It's called 28 Years Since the Heist and Still No Dice. Okay, so I have been to that museum many, many times. It's an absolutely beautiful place. It has an inner courtyard that's open, beautiful plants and flowers and statues and walkways. Just an absolutely beautiful, beautiful place. Now, Isabella Stewart Gardner not only was very wealthy, but she was very much a very eccentric person. Of course, she was part of the high society and elite of Boston. And it was said that she would walk down the street, Boylston Street, with her pet lion on a leash. So just goes to show she's kind of a very eccentric person. Okay, so take a look at that video. Pretty much explains how everything was done. And it talks a little bit about some of the people of interest even today. And that crime has never been solved. Okay, that's it. And we'll move on to our next story from here.